Hey, warmer brother, hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre, who does such tremendous work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've all noticed here in the offseason, and I think that this is very important that we touch upon why there's not going to be a lot of speculating from myself here on this podcast in terms of where these transfers might be going. We're just going to report the news itself in terms of where these transfers go, and we're going to talk a lot about that with Ryan as well, because he's taken that approach along with me, because, man, it's such a defeatist effort at this point as to trying to report upon, there's 27 scheduled visits for insert prospect here and everything like that. So we're going to be fleshing through that and why you only want to be acting upon the news itself and how things can go very much awry in terms of some of these transfers. And we're also going to be talking with them a little bit about the West Virginia situation. Russ Hodge, he has taken over and he's brought with him a few guys. So we're going to be talking about what we can expect on that front for this upcoming season and just the way that he is evaluating the offseason in general. And if what we saw last season with just so many favorites being able to come through in the NCAA tournament is a one-off or perhaps a sign of things to come. And we are in the final segment going to give you guys a roundup of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours on Friday. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to on this podcast via that 5-star review. Again, I do think that it is so important to just not be bogging yourself down in terms of all the portal rumors and everything like that. There's now darn near 2,100 players, by the way, in the transfer portal. So if you figure that there were 12 guys on a team, there's 364 Division I teams. I will do the math here. That meant that last year in college basketball, we had a whopping 4,368 players. Now, some of these guys come up for the Division II ranks, but you have to figure that at least 750 of those guys graduated. So that means that over half the players that are eligible to play this year that were in Division I college basketball last year are in the transfer portal. That, again, is the reason why I don't report on these guys that enter into the transfer portal, because there's more guys not entering the transfer portal than there are. And there was a guy on Friday that decided that he was not going to be in the transfer portal. I actually will be reporting upon that news for you guys, because I do think that it is important when we do see these guys actually return to school. But yeah, it's just one of those cases where it's just getting very convoluted. And something else that we're going to notice as well, there are still a few coaching decisions that have yet to be determined. There's still a few teams that they need to figure out their coach. You should not be surprised if you see some of these teams hire from within. We saw that with High Point elevating their associate head coach on Friday. That, I think, is going to be a trend with a lot of these teams, because every single day that you don't have a coach at the helm, it's putting you further and further back in terms of being able to lock down a roster. And these teams, they don't want to be falling behind, because these guys are coming off the board like wildfire. So just some general thoughts there. I'll try to give you guys these in the first segment, along with answering any of your Twitter/X questions. So these first segments are going to be relatively short moving forward, and they're all powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is doing a tremendous job of making sure that you've got access to your funds 24/7, 365, because unlike some places that utilize credit, this is a bank account. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize the promo code of Greg, GREG, you get a $1 for $1 match on your first $25 deposit. That's edgeboost.bet, promo code Greg. And coming up next, we're going to talk with our good friend Ryan McIntyre of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Not just go Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And it's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard. He does such a tremendous job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He does so all 12 months out of the year, much like myself on the college experience. And additionally, with the Ryan and Russ show, they specialize in West Virginia athletics. So certainly they've been talking about Russ Hodge coming on over there, the transfers that we've been seeing with West Virginia, and so much more. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled MAC. And Ryan, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you so much.
Greg, I appreciate it. We made it, and now, unfortunately, we begin the portal season.
Yes, it certainly is. And we've got ourselves a lot that is going on. And first things first, how about if we go out to your neck of the woods in West Virginia? Because last we were talking, the NIT Final Four was going down, and Russ Hodge, since then, he signs with West Virginia. Has already brought with him a guy or two from North Texas. And just what have you made out of his first week or two on the job over at West Virginia? Because I feel like this is much like what we saw with Darren DeVries, being able to bring over a few guys with him over from Drake. And I would say so far so good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always tough to gauge because they're coming up from a level. But I mean, we've seen guys be able to translate, especially with the just being from the American conference. Continuity does matter. I like the kid Lorian. He's a 6'9", 6'8", 6'9", guy that can guard multiple positions, athletic, knows Hodge's culture. And of course, Ross Hodge, he's a defensive-oriented guy. And to play in the Big 12, you got to be able to have size and have guys that can switch stuff and be able to really, really be able to guard teams. I mean, you watch Houston play for the national championship, Texas Tech in the Elite Eight. Iowa State's always really good. And then to be able to pull the kid in from Wilmington, I think, who started at Niagara. I liked what I see from him in the NCAA tournament. He's a big body, and I think that he's going to be able to translate well over for Ross Hodge in year number one. Harlan Oiha really popped, I thought, last year for Wilmington.
Being able to grab a true seven for like that, I think is so big. And I think the big question that we have with regards to West Virginia is what sort of style are they going to play? Because we recall when Grant McCasland went on over from North Texas to Texas Tech, he was playing at one of the slowest paces in all of college basketball over at North Texas. And not as if Texas Tech is some sort of a blazer now, but they certainly do play much more up-tempo than he did over at North Texas. Do you think Hodge is going to be doing the same, or do you think that we might see, frankly, what we saw last year at West Virginia, where West Virginia was pretty much the northern version of North Texas with the way that they were playing college basketball?
I think they're going to be just like last year in terms of just really grind it out, style of play, drag you in the mud, try and win games in the high 50s, low 60s. I don't think they're going to be able to flip the roster like Texas Tech did. I mean, it paid to have those kind of good players to be able to play faster with guys like JT Toppin, Darian Williams, Elijah Hawkins. I think that they're going to be more of the Iowa State approach. I mean, you're number one under TJ Altenberger, where they played extremely slow, very deliberate in the half court, and just tried to grind you out. And McCasland was like that more so in his first year at Texas Tech before he could get that really, really high-level talent that they were able to display this year getting to the Elite Eight.
Yep, no doubt about it. It takes a few years to be able to build a little bit more of a, shall we say, up-tempo style. And would you say that that is true? It's a little bit easier to be able to play a little bit slower in year number one, year number two, and as you go along, you play a little bit more up-tempo as things go along, because I find that when you're a younger team, when you're a team that is a little bit more on the rise, what have you, it just always feels to me like it's easier to slow a game down rather than speed one up.
I mean, we saw it with Houston against Florida and Duke in the Final Four. I mean, they dictated the tempo of both those games and held two juggernaut offenses in 20 points below their scoring average in the mid-60s. I know they didn't end up winning that Florida game, but that game was at their pace and was able to drag it in the mud. And I agree with you that definitely in year number one, when you're probably not going to be able to have the best roster intact because you're not going to be able to retain anybody because everybody's in the portal, you're probably going to be more deliberate, run more clock offensively, drag it more in the mud, and see if you can steal a couple really close wins by guys just buying into your culture. DeVries did exactly that in year number one, and he should have went to the NCAA tournament if it wasn't for that ridiculous committee decision. So I think Hodge is going to try and duplicate exactly what DeVries did last year and then what his mentor Grant McCasland did in year number one at Texas Tech.
Yep, I think that we're going to see a lot of that as well. So we're in agreement there. As joining me on the show, we do have one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre, who does great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly going to be interesting to see what we get on that front. And you just mentioned it. We've got about 1 billion guys in the transfer portal right now. I've been saying it on the podcast. No longer am I going to be listing off the guys that enter in the transfer portal. I'm actually going to be listing off the guys that return to school, and I do think that that's actually probably the proper way to go, because I just refreshed verbal commits, who they always do a good job of keeping up with all the guys in the transfer portal. And as we record this Thursday evening, 2,073 players in the transfer portal. And just how do you try to decipher it all? Because I don't think that if you did this 24/7, 365, you did absolutely no other sports, you did absolutely nothing else, that would be hard to be able to parse through and be able to track all these moves. And I think that this is just an off season where you need to pretty much shake every single day and try to take a little bit of a piecemeal approach to it all, because anyone trying to do this all at once, I think it's going to be a very defeatist effort with, again, north of 2,000 1,000 players here in the portal.
Absolutely. And I actually took a little bit of a break over these last couple of days to start up on
I don't
my
blame you.
college football preparation, just checking out some spring practices and stuff like that. Come back and I'm like, man, I feel like I missed 2 months. And all I did was miss 2 days. So, yeah, just trying to decipher who's going where. And I'm with you. Like, I don't even talk about who's in the portal anymore. If guys go into the portal, it's like, oh, well, there was a 75% chance he was going in the portal anyway, even if it makes no sense to go in the portal. With the way that it's set up right now and the players having all the leverage, they can sign a contract, but it really doesn't mean anything, like Rob Wright at Baylor, now at BYU. It's chaos. So the way I approach it, I don't really speculate anymore. I just react based off of when they actually sign with the team. And then I talk about how I think those pieces fit. But you're absolutely right. I mean, especially at the mid-major level, all this news just flies so much under the radar because there's just so much volume of players. And I know everybody's trying to front load this because the collective bargain and stuff that's going on there is going to take into effect the rev share on July 1. So I know a lot of the teams are just trying to get all their T's crossed and I's dotted because they know the rev share is coming on July 1st.
Yep, I think that is a good point that you bring up, and that's a big reason why we have been seeing all the moves that we have been seeing. And I don't know if you guys have been doing this on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network as well, but I just really don't speculate these guys that come out with like their top 10, top 15 lists either. Like when a guy signs with the team, we'll react there. But I think that it's also very much a defeatist effort. All these people are like, oh, we've got our crystal ball, and it could be one of 25 teams, where sometimes I make the joke, they should just list the teams that they're not going to be signing with rather than the teams that they are going to be signing with, because some of these lists get just that ridiculous. And how much you look at that as well, because I know that we've got a few people that listen to this podcast that are looking at futures, and I would say that if you're trying to be able to gauge futures based on the signing of like one guy, that probably is not going to be enough for me to be able to push over the top, because again, with all these rosters, if you find a team that has more than 30% of their minutes returning from a season ago, you've got a team of gold.
I'm completely with you. And Greg, we could have the best sources in the world, for example, Rob Wright, and be like, yeah, he's going back. But if somebody comes in with a pot of $3 million at the 23rd hour, they're not going to stay where all the indications said so. They're going to go follow the money. And you know what? I really don't blame them if they're doubling their salary, just like everybody would do so in this country. So, yeah, I'm with you. I don't react until it's actually officially final. I don't even speculate anymore because it's a waste of time. If I had to give out a future, I would probably look at Houston. They just lost a heartbreaker on Monday night, but they actually fit the bill in terms of actual production coming back. I know they lose Cryer, they lose Roberts. Arsenault, I know, hit the transfer portal earlier. But for the most part, Houston doesn't usually lose guys to the portal. So maybe they let that loss on Monday night fuel their season. I know they got Pop Isaacs already in the portal. I don't know about that fit, but you know what? I'll trust Kelvin Sampson that he knows what he's doing. He's won a couple more games than you and I had. So I think Houston would be the one future just because I know what they got coming back.
Yep, and that's not the case for too many of these teams as well. So, I mean, man, when you can find any team that has like any sort of minutes returning, that's big. Like, I do think that that's one of the biggest things to take a look at as well, because we're talking about all these guys in the transfer portal. We're talking about all these guys where it's like, oh, they're going here, they're going there, what have you. And how much would you rather actually parse through and look at these guys that actually returning to a school? Like, I view Seth Trimmel returning to North Carolina as being bigger than insert your top 25 transfer here going to a different school, just because being able to be back with that program, being able to have that camaraderie, I think that that's a bigger deal than the big time transfer that's going to a new school, because you know what you're going to be able to get out of them, and you know that another year in that system is going to make them all the better.
Absolutely. And Greg, just think about it this year too. Like Walter Clayton was a second-year transfer. He took a huge jump from year number 1 to year number 2. LJ Cryer took a big jump from his first year to his second year. You just go down the list. I mean, and you look at the teams that have won the national championship over the last 4 years. Yeah, I know we're in the crazy wild West era, but Florida, they had a bunch coming back. They had, 70% of their team from the year before returning production. The years before that, UConn had a ton coming back. They poked a couple pieces here and there in the portal like free agency. Baylor, they had a ton coming back. Kansas had a ton coming back. I think they were around 70 to 80%. So I would still value teams like Houston, teams like Purdue that just have simply more continuity. And I guess it's a result of just having a really good culture and a good coach that they're like, I'm not going to go risk what the unknown is. I can get paid here. I know my coach is going to care about me. He's going to challenge me. He's going to make me a better person. Sometimes I think we lose sight of the big picture, just trying to chase a couple extra bucks.
Yep, no question about it. I think that is so big. And I think that that's a blueprint to be taking a look at as well, because as we know, in this day and age, if you're a school that's not utilizing the transfer portal, I'm sorry, I'm looking at you, Marquette. You're just saying very, very stagnant. But I also do think that it's big to take a look at these teams that they utilize the portal for more than just a 1 year rental as well, which I recognize that again, we talk about the money that's being thrown around. Much easier said than done to be able to keep a guy for multiple years in the same system. But that said, how much do you want to be prioritizing these teams where it feels like they're taking developmental guys that are going to be a part of the program for 2-3 years and be able to keep them around rather than just utilizing a whole bunch of guys that are going to be in the program for less than 12 months? Because I feel like that's really been the blueprint for these teams that have had success over the last 3-4 years in the NCAA tournament. They've been teams that have utilized the portal, but have utilized the portal for guys that are going to be around for more than just 1 year.
Yeah, UConn with Tristan Newton comes to mind. LJ Cryer talked about Walter Clayton. They've just been able to do a really good job of plugging a piece here, a couple there, and then they just address the portal like it's free agency where, all right, hey, we need a three-point shooter to complement our big inside and our point guard. All right, let's go get Cam Spencer from Rutgers, UConn last year. Or if we need a big, and let's go out and get a rim protector like Alabama did with Cliff Murray this year. So I'm with you, Greg. In a perfect world, you want to use the portal to get a couple guys every year, but you want those guys to stay. You don't just want the 12-month rental, unless, of course, they're a senior, and then they're a 12-month rental. But if they're a sophomore and junior and you can get a 2-3 year player, that's big time. That's the Johnny Brooms of the world. So I definitely value that.
Yep, I do as well. And you want to be staying away from, I hate to bring this guy's name up, but Mr. AJ Storr is going to be on school number 8 in 8 years, which that's where we're at right now with some of these guys in college basketball right now. Is we do have one of our good friends and Ryan McIntyre of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And want to get your thoughts on this as well, because we saw this be a big theme last offseason. There were a lot of teams that were prioritizing big men. The big men were the guys that were getting all the NIL dollars, like Great Osabor, what have you. Do you think that might be a little bit more of a theme this year? Or do you think that after what we saw in this past NCAA tournament, there might be a little bit more emphasis on guards? Because I thought it was very interesting. The big men that got paid this past offseason, this past cycle, a lot of them just really frankly didn't pan out. And it felt like the teams that put their eggs in the basket of the star big men, they just did not have seasons that you would have expected. And a lot of them fell short of expectations.
Absolutely. I think Rob Wright's already set in the market, getting the number that he got at BYU. So I think it might be the year of the guard in the portal. And then I'm interested also, Greg, to see the guys that enter the portal, go through the draft process, and come back to school, the Coleman Hawkins route, where there's a scarcity of players left in the portal. Are they able to get a big number at the end because there's so little players left available that they end up overpaying for a guy like Coleman Hawkins or a Great Osabor or stuff like that. So that's some of the stuff I'm looking at coming into this. Who enters this draft process with maybe not the intentions of actually going to the draft, but getting an evaluation, but ultimately to get a better payday at the back end in the portal. A guy like Darian Williams pops to mind.
Yep, I think that's such a good point that you bring up, because if I were a college basketball player right now, I would let these guys get their money early on, but we know that there are some teams that it's much like NFL free agency where it's like, oh, we've got all this money and we've got nobody to give it to. Oh, thank goodness there's someone with 7 points a game last season. Let's just give it to that guy and everything like that. We see it in the NBA all the time as well, where you get like some laughably big contract for like Timofey Mozgov back in the day and everything like that. So I do think that that's interesting to take a look at. And Ryan, I know that you're doing a great job parsing through all the, shall we say, difficulties of this offseason in college basketball. Billion guys in the transfer portal, more than 50 teams making coaching changes this offseason, yet you guys are staying on top of it also. Love to get people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yes, sir, Greg. I appreciate it, man. I know you're doing the baseball grind now, too, so you're a busy man. Go check us out over at the College Experience every single night, breaking down the portal, carousel. You never know when the carousel is going to pop off again, too, with some NBA hires. So go check us out there. And then West Virginia fans, go check out the Ryan and Rush Show.
Absolutely. It was right around this time last year that John Calipari was heading on over to Arkansas as well. I still remember his meeting with the team where he had no team. And that was a very, very famous quote to say the least. And hey, they made the Sweet 16 this year. So credit to them, and always a credit to Ryan McIntyre for doing such a great job of covering this great sport. So big thanks to him for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the Beast Family Podcast. And coming up next, let's recap the news and notes that we've seen in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ryan McIntyre, who does tremendous work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now let's take a look at everything that we saw in terms of news and notes in college basketball from Friday. And we did see a big man decide that he is going to be going to Michigan. That'd be Ade Mara. He, at 7'3", certainly is a load. And for Mara, he only averaged about 6 points per contest this past season over at USC. But I think that this is a good addition because he really had a rough start to the season this past year over at USC, and then he was able to pick up a little bit of steam late, and he was able to pull in there right around about 4 boards per contest as well. Certainly not a guy that was able to light it up in terms of three-point shooting or anything like that. That said, if you take a look at what he's able to do in conference play versus non-conference play, he was able to get better and better as the season went along. If you look at his averages from January through March, he was able to put up in the neighborhood about 8 points per contest. As a matter of fact, his Big Ten results were about 7 points per contest, as he was in non-conference play just really shaky, and then in conference play he was able to build up more and more momentum. So I do think that that's going to be a nice little bit of an upside play there. I do think that that is going to be helpful for this Michigan team moving forward, as they also bring in Yaxel Lendeborg, who was just able to fill up the stat sheet and do a little bit of everything this past season for them. You get a little bit of a former 4-star prospect in terms of this Big Ten team. For Penn State transfer Miles Goodman at 6'11", he has decided that he's going to be going to Oregon. Only saw about a point and a half and a rebound and a half per contest, but the Oregon Ducks have a way of being able to develop some of these younger guys, so we'll see how that pans out. And for Rutgers, they are going to be bringing in Tyreke Francis. They always have a little bit of a liking for these mid-major guys that produce at the lower level. They certainly aren't going to have like 2 of the top 5 draft picks in the draft like they had last season, but Tyreke Francis, he was like the lone guy for NJIT that gave the team anything whatsoever. 19 points, 3.5 assists, steal, 4.5 rebounds per game. Not a guy that was necessarily able to light it up from 3-point range, but with George Washington transfer, Darren Buchanan was averaging about 12 points, 5 rebounds per game, also going on over there. That's a relatively good solid haul for Rutgers, as for Rutgers, they're going to be looking to much fewer of the one-and-done guys, and they're going to be looking to a little bit more experience. I think that that's going to be helping them out moving forward, and this is also going to be very helpful, as you got a pretty nice ad here, as you had John Hughley decide that he is going to be going to Duquesne. And John Hughley, it feels like, has been in college basketball for about 1,700 years. He was not able to get out there on the floor this past season when he was over at Xavier, but I mean, he's had a couple of relatively solid stops. As a matter of fact, this will be year number 6 for him, because he's had 2 seasons cut short due to injury. His best year came in the 2021-22 campaign where he was at Pittsburgh. He was averaging 15 points per contest, holding in there 8 rebounds per game. Had a little bit of a rebirth with Oklahoma 2 seasons ago. The 2023-24 campaign was averaging 8.5 points, shooting 39.5% from 3-point range, while standing in that neighborhood of 6'9" or so. So that's someone that I think could be a very nice upside guy for Duquesne. He's a former top 100 recruit, so that's big for them because they just need a little bit more firepower. We'll see what the guard play is going to be looking like, but that's a good pickup for them. And then you've got Willem Breitenbach. He was over at Washington this last season, part-time starter, 6'10", man that wears the specs, 4.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game. He's able to give you a little bit of versatility, but not a ton. But he's going to Grand Canyon, and this Grand Canyon organization just knows how to be able to find these guys that are good but not great at the high major level, bring them in, and then be able to get them to produce. I think that he's going to be the latest of them. We've seen him with the likes of Duke Brandon and company, so that is a really good pickup for them, and that's one that I personally really do like. This was a little bit startling in terms of what we saw on Friday. Duke Miles, he was committed to Virginia, and it was looking like Virginia was putting together a nice roster. He is back in the transfer portal, as for Mr. Miles this last season, he was over at Oklahoma. He was putting up double figures in the Missouri Valley Conference 2 seasons ago, 9.5 points, right around about 2 assists per contest. I thought that he was going to be very much transcendent with a Virginia team that it looked like they were very much looking to go guard-oriented because they bring in Ryan Odom from VCU, and for Mr. Miles this past season, he was shooting 43% from 3-point. He is back in the transfer portal, so that's a bit of a loss for Virginia, and you have to think that this was a case where there was a little bit of money thrown around, so very, very fascinating to see what's going to be happening with Duke Miles. Just nothing other than your casual, good, clean family fun. So we will see what's going to be happening on his front. We know what's happening on this front. Jaden Barnell, he was over at Sam Amford this past season. He was a rock-solid player with 14 points, 4 boards, shot 40% from 3-point. He has decided that he is going to be going to USC. It's going to be interesting to see how they utilize him because, as we know, at the USC, they bring in 100 million transfers. Some of these guys play a ton. Some of these guys play absolutely no minutes whatsoever. And some of the guys are somewhere between A&B, and USC is probably going to bring in 10 transfers once again this season. That's how it worked out so well for the Muss Bus over the last few seasons, but he is a guy that has been one of the OGs of the transfer portal, so very curious to see what's going to be happening on this front. Always love the Twitter/X handle at portal_updates. They do a great job of being able to keep up with these D2 guys as well as Ryjon Blackwell. He was over at USC Aiken a season ago. He has decided that he is going to be going to Marist, and I love these mid-majors that bring in these D2 dynamo guys. He was last year averaging 13.5 points, shot 38% from 3-point, rock solid defender. USC Aiken is one of those teams that always at the Division II level is relatively rock solid. Feels like he's going to be a guy that's going to be able to fit that, shall we say, mold a little bit as well. So I think that is a very good pickup for them. This is also a pretty rock solid pickup. How about Miles Rigsby heading on over to Tulsa? Tulsa actually adding some guys, as Rigsby, he was over at Troy this past season, and he was able to average 12 points, a steal and a half per contest. Not a guy that's necessarily going to light you up from 3, but he pairs very well with Miles Barnsable. Barnsable was over at St. Thomas. He decided about 48 or so hours ago that he was going to commit to Tulsa as well. A nice dynamo scorer, not necessarily a guy that's able to dole out the ball. So Tulsa's still in search of a little bit of a point guard, but they're filling out a little bit of a better roster. I've always liked Eric Conkle as a coach as well. I feel like things have just been less than savory for him, to say the least, at Tulsa, but I don't think that that's necessarily on him. I think that that's a little bit more on just Tulsa not necessarily putting the resources that they need to into basketball, but we will see if there's a little bit of a change there. Larry Johnson, no, not the former Kansas City Chiefs running back. He has decided that he is going to be going to McNeese. He was over at Creighton this last season, just did not get any playing time whatsoever. He decided to jump ship. He's a former top 200 prospect, and that's going to be rock solid for McNeese as they're looking to build themselves up, as they lost quite a few guys just in the transfer portal in general. Now they've got Mr. Armstrong, who was the assistant over at Baylor, taking over the program, and appears as though he's still going to be able to bring in some good talent. McNeese, in terms of Southland terms, they've got quite a bit of NIL, and the Southland in general has been sticking a lot of money into college basketball, so we'll see if that continues to be the case. Avante Parker, he last season was just not able to see a lot of production over at Georgia Southern. 2 years ago, he was very rock solid. 2 years ago, a little bit over block, 5.5 rebounds, 8 points per contest. I have to think that he was injured and just fell out of favor in general with regards to that coaching staff. He has decided that he is going to be going to Queens NC, and for Queens, this is very important because Queens NC actually had the nation's leader in shot blocks this past season. Like, I don't think that a lot of people would think of Queens that way because this has been a defense that, since they got to the Division I ranks, has been less than tremendous. Malcolm Wilson, he was a true 7-footer that was leading the country with about 3.5 blocks per contest, but being able to bring in a guy like a Parker, he's not going to be quite the same as Wilson. He's a little bit shorter, but that said, being able to bring in a guy of that nature, I do think it's going to be able to help them out moving forward, and I do think that that's going to be pretty solid as well. And then we've got a lot of guys entering the transfer portal, like I said on the podcast a few days ago. I'm not going to be reporting every single time a guy like Cade Tyson, Dior Johnson, guys like this enter in the transfer portal, because it would just be a defeatist effort, because it feels like everyone's in the transfer portal right now. But that said, we did have a commitment from Rashad Marshall, who was very good over at Arkansas State this last season. He did a nice job of being able to hit the boards, a little bit over 5 boards, 4.5 points per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to Austin Peay, and the Governators are going to be a very fascinating team for this upcoming season. Very much a down season for them last year. Year number 1 under the tutelage of Corey Gibson went really well, and Marshall is a former top 100 recruit that began his career over at Ole Miss. Didn't see a lot of playing time there. Was a part-time starter for Arkansas State. A little bit more of a, shall we say, rim protector, a little bit more of a defense-oriented guy. Austin Peay, they're a team that likes to play very slow and very under control. Do think that that's going to be a good pickup for them. You've got Isaiah Watts, who was over at Washington State this past season. He was rock solid, 11 points per contest, shot 35% from 3-point. He has decided that he is going to be going to Maryland. With Maryland's Crab 5 no longer being available, you can tell that Maryland is trying to be able to build a little bit more depth. I mean, what Maryland did this past season was very good, and Buzz Williams is certainly going to be trying to transform this program a little bit more. His teams, when they were over at Texas A&M, were very much built on depth, and I do feel like Buzz Williams has a little bit of versatility. I remember over at Marquette, his teams were a little bit more offense-oriented, but that said, I do think that this is going to be a good pickup for them, and I do like the way that Buzz Williams has been able to structure things here in the first few weeks, so we'll see if he's going to be able to continue that moving forward. You've got Isaiah Manning, no relation to Peyton Manning. He has decided that he is going to be going to Sam Houston State, a former 3-star prospect that just didn't see a lot of playing time this past year over at TCU, was averaging about 2 points per contest, capable of popping threes, not necessarily great at being able to launch it from three, probably going to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented guy, and that's exactly what Sam Houston State needs. They were absolutely terrible on the defensive side of things this past season, so we will see what is going to be happening there, but they do add a guy from the Power Conference level for Sam Houston State, so that is a W for them. Cole Franklin, he has decided that he is going to be going to North Texas. Daniel Robinson, he was the coach over at Cleveland State. He decided that he was going to be jumping ship. He went to North Texas, and for Mr. Franklin, he last season was averaging about 4 points, 2.5 rebounds per game over at Cleveland State. You have to think that this is more of a culture and a depth piece in general, so that's going to be helping them out just a little bit. And we do have to report up on this because I mentioned it. I'm not going to be reporting every single time we see one of these guys enter in the transfer portal, but I will report on some of these guys saying Austin Benjini, who was over at Navy, and he has decided that he is going to be heading on back to Navy. Benjini, 18.5 points per contest. I can tell you right now, Navy probably not with the deepest NIL pockets in the world, but the fact that they get their leading scorer back, this is absolutely massive for the midshipmen, a school that in this day and age of NIL, they had quite a bit of success on the football side of things. I do think that for the basketball side of things, being able to bring back your top guy in Benjini, that's massive, so good news for them. And for Virginia, I was mentioning it a little bit before, you did have some bad news with Duke Miles no longer going to them, but you are going to be getting Devin Tillis, and as Devin Tillis, he was over at UC Irvine this last year, zots out for the Anteaters, and he averaged at about 6'7" or so, 13.5 points, 7.5 boards, shot 39.5% from 3-point. It is a career 38.5% 3-point shooter. Very much going to be a good fit with that Ryan Odom style. I do like what he's able to bring to the table, and I do think that for Virginia, they're doing things right here in the transfer portal. Dealt a little bit of a blow on Friday, as I mentioned before, but all in all, I do think that things are heading in the right direction for them, and we also did see High Point decide to make their hire at coach because they do lose their coach in Alan Huss as he becomes the head coach in waiting over at Creighton, where he was an assistant a little bit before, and Flynn Clayman, he was the associate head coach over for High Point this last season. He's going to try to keep as much camaraderie as humanly possible with High Point, probably keep much of the style for them. He has decided that he is going to be taking that associate head coaching job and turning that into the head coaching job, so High Point staying in house in terms of their coaching decision, and we are certainly going to be keeping up with that as the offseason rolls along, as it's only April 12th right now, and we have seen 100 million billion moves here in the transfer portal in terms of the coaching hires in general, and I'm going to do my best to keep up with them all right here on Coast to Coast Hoops for you guys, as I'm coming at you guys every single day, regular season and off season. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larsium, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and a big thanks once again to our good friend and Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, for joining me, and I'll be with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.